Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you all? Good. So from what I understand, you're a youth group and you guys meet up every Friday. Is it usually a halakha or what else do you guys do? And girls?
Typically, what do you guys do?
We usually do dances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and you know, whenever I go speak somewhere, no matter what age group, I feel like when I ask questions in the beginning, it's always more hesitant, but by the end we'll see if you guys are asking a lot of questions. So we're talking about Ramadan today, and my work, I cover wellness from a mind, body, soul perspective. And I'm focusing, I know we have teenagers today, and I have some things prepared of how to have a healthy Ramadan. But I'm going to ask some questions first, and this time, you don't have to participate if you don't want to, but I simply would like you to raise your hand. There'll be yes or no questions. Assalamu alaikum, girls. Before I get into that, I always start presentations off with a dua, so I'll share a quick dua, inshallah, and then I'll also give you each a personal moment if you want to make dua privately, if you want to set an intention. Sometimes we go to talks and we hear things and it sounds good, but it's also really good to set an intention. So, Bismillah, Rabbi Shrah li Sadri, wa yassir li Amri, wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ya Allah, thank you for gathering us here today. Please allow this presentation to be beneficial. Ya Allah, please allow us to reach this blessed month of Ramadan. Ya Allah, please bless and guide this youth group and increase us in all good things. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Take a moment if you'd each like to make a short dua, set an intention, what you might want to get out of today, what you might want to get out of Ramadan. No pressure, take a moment and then I'll start shortly after. Okay. So if you're still making dua or anything like that, take your time, inshallah. So I have a question. How many of you care about health and wellness? I will not be offended as a wellness professional if you don't, but it's important to me to know your interest level and whatnot. So we have some hands raised. Okay. Does anyone want to share, and I won't push it, but raise your hand if you want to share what specifically you care about. Anyone? Okay, that's fine. So I know we have some teens and then we have some younger kids as well. So this could apply to teenagers and children, but I want to share some wellness principles. Wellness could mean a lot of different things. It could mean our nutrition. It could mean fitness or physical activity. It could also mean our spiritual health. It can mean our emotional health and relational health, so how you interact with your parents or whomever you live with, your friends, all of that correlates. And as Muslims, this applies to us in this dunya and also in the akhirah. So, 7 principles that are important, not just for Ramadan, but all year long, is first of all, when it comes to nutrition and fitness or physical health, everyone is different. So, how many of you, I don't know if this is anything you've ever seen, and if not, it's okay, but how many of you have ever heard contradicting advice when it comes to health? Like one person says this is good and then somewhere else you hear it's bad. Has anyone had that? Do you want to share an example? If not, you don't have to.
No, I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine. I saw some hands in the back. So often we hear that. Sometimes some people say, well, this food is good, but this food is bad, or this is what you should do and whatnot. And I hope that you're enjoying your childhood and teenage life and you're not being influenced by that, but nonetheless that happens a lot. Now when I studied nutrition and I work with clients of different ages, I was trained in a way that I studied over 100 different theories and everyone's very unique. So depending on where your family's from, depending on your taste preferences, different things work for different people, from genetics to goals. Any athletes in the room? Okay, do you want to share what you play? You don't have to. Okay, that's fine. I saw, okay, do you want to share what you play? If not, that's okay. Okay, that's okay. So regardless, the point is I will not be sharing with you today anything that's very, very specific or rigid, but just ways, if you're interested, how to be healthier for Ramadan. And maybe for some of you, certain aspects appeal more than others. Now, what's really important, and this is really important, and people often learn this as they become adults, but it's really cool to actually learn this earlier on in life. And that's that you want to focus more on how you feel regarding the foods you eat, the exercise you may do, your digestion, and body composition. And sometimes we are told to focus on some other things that aren't really sustainable. You also want to understand that, depending on your ages, which there's definitely an age range here, your body is changing and it's growing, and that's something to honor and respect. It's all about focusing on consistency, not deprivation, and connecting everything you do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some said they like sports. I'm sure some of you have things you enjoy to do, right? Anyone want to share any hobbies they like? You don't have to, but would anyone like to? Okay. Coming to Muslim Youth in Action on Friday maybe is a good hobby. But nonetheless,
I think they're in the Marvel movies.
I heard someone speak about that. I heard that beforehand, and this is my husband, Brother Kyle. But even if you're going to see a movie, and obviously as teenagers, as kids, you always want to get the okay from your parents, and not all movies are equal. But nonetheless, even if you're doing something like playing a game or watching a movie, everything could be made into an act of worship if we set the right intention. So we can be banking and getting good deeds from eating, exercise, fun. Obviously, it depends what specifically those things are, but we can connect everything. Have any of you ever heard about how there's several people, this is a really popular hadith, you might have heard it in the masjid, about how there's several types of people that will be shaded on the day where there is no shade but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's shade? Anyone familiar? Okay, do you guys know that you all fall in one category? Anyone know what it is? And if not, I won't quiz you, but does anyone want to share? Okay, so it's a youth who spends their time in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is tough sometimes as a younger person. It's more common for people as they get older to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to think about the next life. But when you're young and you're here on a Friday, that's really awesome, mashallah. Most importantly, you want to have fun and enjoy life. So sometimes some people talk about health and nutrition and fitness, and it's not fun, it doesn't taste good. And I don't believe in that because one, it's not sustainable. Two, I'm sure you each have your favorite foods. Anyone want to share their favorite foods? I'll keep giving you opportunities to share, but no pressure. And it's important that you enjoy those, right? And that you enjoy your life. As Muslims, sometimes there are certain religious practices where people, and of course we respect everyone of any religious faith, but sometimes there are practices where there isn't like any enjoyment in terms of this worldly life. So we don't believe in that as Muslims. We just simply believe that, we never sacrifice the final life for this temporary life. And then last, and I'll give you a really nice tip that you can use in your own unique way at the end, but you want to really just use Ramadan as a reflection period. Some people like to set goals, and you can do that for sure, but it's a great time to reflect. So we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition. How many of you fast during the month of Ramadan? And this is not like a quiz or who's better or whatnot. How many of you, for the youth in the room, do you mind closing your eyes just so people's answers could be private? If you really don't want to close your eyes, you don't have to. Does anyone find fasting difficult? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, do any of you enjoy fasting? Like it's fun or? Okay, if it's like neutral, raise your hand. Okay, how many of you feel energetic when you fast? Okay, and does anyone feel less energy than usual? Okay, so you all can put your hands down. Thank you for sharing, and you can open your eyes. So what I'm hoping to do in a little bit, there's a Quran connection, but then I'm going to talk for a decent amount about nutrition, is share some ways. Raise your hand if you're interested in learning ways to be more energetic in Ramadan. Even though Ramadan is about food, it really isn't about food. And I'm going to show you at the end how it is about food, but it's not. But nonetheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to take care of our body. It's an amana, it's a trust. So I want to talk to you about two ayats in the Quran. So the first one comes from Surah Al-Baqarah, and it basically is telling us why we fast. And for those of you who may have studied Quran and whatnot, a very common way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses people in the Quran. There's different categories, but one common way is addressing, "O you who have believed," right? And whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this in the Quran, Assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining us. And I'll send Brother Tariq the recording, inshallah, if anyone wants to watch what they missed. But nonetheless, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses, "Oh, you have believed." So these messages are for people who have declared they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they want to follow his path, right? And inshallah attain Jannah and a nice life here as well. Now, we're told that fasting is decreed upon us the way it was decreed upon those before us so that we may gain righteousness. And of course, when we translate that into English, it's a little bit different because you don't get the whole gem of it as when it's in Arabic, but the word in the ayah that is used is the word taqwa, and that's really just about nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more when we are fasting. Because, and inshallah you're remembering even without fasting, but it's just a constant reminder. Ramadan is, sometimes it simplifies or things, and sometimes people struggle with Ramadan, so that's okay if you do, but often things become clearer, like our purpose becomes clearer, and decision making becomes clearer. Now I also want to share an ayah. This is not specifically related to Ramadan, but it's also very related to everything. And this is from Surah Al-Dhariyat, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and the Arabic for this is, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And I did not create jinn and mankind except to worship me. Talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So this is powerful because this ayah, there's so many ayah and hadith that could tell us what our purpose of life is, but this ayah is telling us exactly why we were created, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, does that mean we stay at the masjid all day long and we just pray from now until we hit the grave? Raise your hand if you don't think. I see some hands nodding. So remember in the beginning when I said that almost anything could be turned into an act of worship? Almost anything can. Obviously, you can't turn something that is, blatantly forbidden or whatnot into an act of worship. But even if you do something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us not to do, and you make repentance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that those bad deeds could be turned into good deeds. Now we can't trick Allah, obviously, so you don't go doing bad things to repent to then get good deeds, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our innermost intention, but this just shows us how everything could be an act of worship. So we're going to look at everything through that lens. Now, I didn't know this when I was a teenager, but have any of you ever heard of the word macronutrient? If not, that's okay. Basically, that means 3 major categories of nutrition that your body absolutely needs. The complementary word to that is micronutrients, and I'll explain what that means. Macronutrients, raise your hand if you've ever heard the word protein, fats, and carbohydrates. So you've probably heard that, right? Like it's on like labels. And food labels are important. So sometimes, and they have their place, but a lot of times when people focus on nutrition, they focus on things such as weight. Have you ever heard BMI? You might hear that when you go to the doctor. Your doctor talks to you about BMI. And it's not that that's not important, but remember a couple slides ago, I mentioned to you that body composition is important. So just because when you weigh yourself, for example, all that shows you is your difference between gravity, like how you relate to gravity on this earth. That doesn't necessarily mean we know what your body composition is. Body composition means how much muscle is on your body, how strong your bones are. So body composition is really important and should be a focus. Similarly, on food labels, you'll see proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and that is important, but it's not as important as ingredients, right? So that's very important to keep in mind. Nonetheless, to survive, we need proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Sometimes there are some diets or some fads that tell people not to eat one of these things, but macronutrients are the major categories of nutrition that we need to survive. A micronutrient would be things like vitamins. You know how sometimes on label you'll see like vitamins or minerals, like it'll say like vitamin E, vitamin D. Assalamu alaikum to those joining us. Now what do each of these things do? Protein. Can anyone give me an example of protein? Yes. Okay, so meat is an example of protein. Anyone else? I think I saw your hand up.
I was going to say protein strengthens the muscle tissue.
Okay, absolutely. So very good. Thank you. Yes.
Nuts.
Okay, nuts. Absolutely.
Chicken.
Yes, chicken. So those are all examples of protein, right? And thank you for sharing, but you'll see here that protein is really important because it nourishes and strengthens our muscle tissue. It also keeps us full and it repairs cells. How many of you get hungry when you're fasting? Okay, so that's normal, right? And again, Ramadan food, it is about food, but it's not about food, and we'll wrap up with what I mean by that. But there are ways, and the goal of Ramadan and fasting isn't to never feel hungry or to have all the energy in the world. That if someone's focusing on that, they're missing the whole point. But the idea is that, Ramadan is not an excuse necessarily to, to think like, oh, I have no energy, I can't do anything. Of course, if you're struggling, be easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always encourages us to be easy with ourselves. So we need proteins, we need fats. Now, anyone know an example of fats in food? Yes.
Oils.
Oils, okay, absolutely, yes.
Apple.
So apples don't have fat, but that's a good guess. Do you like apples? Okay, do you have a favorite kind? There's a lot of kinds. That's okay. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to ask you, if you want to share apple will be in the next category, inshallah. But there's no fats in apples, but anyone want to say any other sources of fat? Now, sometimes we are taught that fats are not good for us. There are certain types of fats that aren't that great, such as something called trans fat. Has anyone ever heard that word before? Okay, do you know what it is? Raise your hand if you want to share about it. If not, you don't have to. But you typically get trans fat in processed foods because they help increase shelf life. In foods that are use a lot of oil. Oil can be very healthy, but depending, like if someone is frying something, there are healthy ways to fry and whatnot. I know that's important to some cultures and whatnot, but fats are actually very important, and there are healthy forms of fat. So someone said oil, some of the best. Does anyone know one of the best oils, and it actually is derived from a Quranic prophetic food? Yes.
Oh, is it extra virgin olive oil?
Yes, so olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is very, very good for you. Anyone know any other healthy oils? Okay, so olive oil is good for you. Anyone ever hear of coconut oil? That's also good for you, and that's becoming more popular these days as well. Avocados, raise your hand if you like avocados. Anyone? So some. And if not, I know people that don't like it, but, and again, like I said in the beginning, you want to focus on things that you like. So someone said nuts. Was that you for nuts? Or am I mixing it up? Oh, right there. I'm sorry. You said chicken, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember. Alhamdulillah. So nuts are actually a source of protein and fats, which is really awesome. Next, carbohydrates. Anyone want to give me examples of carbohydrates? Yes.
Pasta?
Okay, so pasta. Anything else? Yes.
Bread.
Bread. There's one more. Do you remember what you said last time?
Apple.
Yes. So an apple would be a form of carbohydrate. Anyone else? Yes.
Watermelon.
Okay, watermelon. Yes.
Is it like rice?
Yes, rice is a form of carbohydrate. So carbohydrates provide energy and fiber. Now we could really break carbohydrates up into two categories. It could be broken down more, but for simplicity, I'm going to break it down into two, okay? So one would be slow carbohydrates and one would be fast. So something like pasta or rice, that's going to give you quicker energy. Some things are slow releasing, like fruits, watermelon, things that have fiber, because fiber slows down digestion in a good way. It's not just fruits and vegetables though. So things like sweet potatoes or plantains. Anyone ever hear of spaghetti squash? It's a type of squash that also looks like spaghetti. I see some hands raising. So actually, they're all good, and you should all have the things that you like as long as you have one of each of these things in each of your meals. But it would be smart to have things like pasta or rice within good portion sizes during iftar, but not the smartest to have it at suhoor. Now, if you want to, you could do what you want. I have a very live and let live philosophy. But if you want things that are going to keep you full throughout the day, even just timing that out would be really smart. Like you might want some of those carbohydrates that go through the body quicker if you're going to go to Tarawih or if you have any activities or whatnot, but then you want something that's also going to keep you going longer later on. And I will have questions at the end, inshallah. Okay, now vegetables and fruits. Let's be honest, no pressure here. How many of you like vegetables and fruits? Okay, so a good amount of people. How many of you like vegetables? You can raise your hand again. I just realized some might like vegetables but not fruits. Okay, how many of you like fruits? Okay, so here's the thing. There's so many types. Usually you see like a very limited portion when you go to the supermarket because there's even more. Like if anyone here ever been to like a farmer's market, you could see like more or an actual farm. But vegetables and fruits are so important. And remember at the beginning I said sometimes when people talk about what's healthy, it gets confusing. Now, no matter what dietary theory or method people are saying is healthy, you'll always see that vegetables and fruits are always very, very important. Now, you could eat the ones you like and not eat the ones you don't like. Now, greens are very important because they help alkalize the body. Anyone ever hear of that word? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of it. If not, that's okay. So, what it means is, and you might do this sometime in science class if you haven't already, but there's something called pH level. And every food, so I see like heads nodding now, things could be alkaline or acidic or somewhere in the middle. Foods that are alkaline help give us energy. So something like a lot of carbohydrates like your breads, your rice, your pasta, they're more acidic. Something like your meats, your chicken, they're acidic. That doesn't mean we shouldn't eat them, but we always want to combine them with good alkalizing food because that helps balance things out. That will help give you energy. So here's the thing.
Meats are acidic?
In the body, yes. Yeah, but nonetheless, it also depends what kind. So quality is also very important. Assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining us. Even things like, certain carbohydrates and whatnot. And it's not, we definitely don't want to avoid acidic food. That's why sometimes you'll hear certain people say, to avoid those sorts of things. The thing is that everyone's very unique. For some people, they actually wouldn't be healthier by not eating things like that. But we want, even Islamically speaking, we don't just believe in halal when it comes to meat or chicken, but we also believe in tayyib. What did the animal eat? What's the quality of it? And whatnot. But the idea is you're really going to amp up your nutrition levels if with your meals, you're also eating alkalizing foods. So things like greens especially. Now, if you don't like greens, there are ways to make them better. Most people who don't like greens, maybe all they've tried are things like certain vegetable recipes they didn't like. Most people really like roasted vegetables. Anyone here like smoothies? Anyone here do smoothies? Okay, so a little bit, and I have some recipes later if anyone wants to take a photo of it, inshallah. But the idea is you want to be eating vegetables and fruits, and if you don't like one, you could find another one that you like. Someone mentioned watermelon. That's a really good food for Ramadan. Fruits and vegetables provide minerals, antioxidants, a lot of nutrition. And people get embarrassed to talk about this, but it regulates bowel movements. What goes in must come out, and it's really important to have healthy digestion, inshallah. Now, some people might not like this, and you don't have to do it, but lemon water is a really, really great way to increase your energy in Ramadan. How many of you like lemons, generally speaking? Okay. Any of you like lemonade, which obviously has sugar in it too, but there is a way to make it without sugar as well, although you can drink it with sugar as well, but if you really just want to keep up your energy levels in Ramadan. Now, we know that does anyone know, and it's actually here, so if you read it, then okay, but does anyone know how much water we're supposed to drink in a day? Yes.
I think like 75%.
Say that one more time.
Like
You said 75%, or I couldn't hear.
I think it's like 8 cups.
7 to 8 cups. Okay, anyone else want to share anything different, or? Yes.
4.
4, okay, anyone else? Yeah.
Is there like half an ounce per pound or something like that?
So, close. So here's the thing. Let me ask you a question. Do you think, can I use you as an example? You can say no.
Okay.
All right, how old are you?
I'm 8.
You're 8. Okay. Can I use you as an example? All right, how old are you? 12. Okay. And you're good to let me use you, my husband?
Sure.
All right, alhamdulillah. So, do you think that an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a almost 30-year-old needs the same amount of water? Does that make sense? Does it make sense if someone, do you know how tall you are? It's okay if you don't. Okay. Do you know how tall you are?
I think I'm like 5'2".
Okay, absolutely. So do you think it makes sense that someone who's 5'2" versus someone who's 6'1" needs the same amount of water? Do you think someone who's still growing, so all of you are still growing, right? Minus the adults in the room. Do you think it makes sense that you all need the same exact nutrition? So generally speaking, guidelines usually say 7 to 8 cups, which is like 64 ounces. And if you're drinking that much, you're probably good no matter what your body size is. But people need different things, right? Depending on your age, your gender. If you're an athlete, you need more. If a woman, let's say, is pregnant, there's just so many things that go into that. This doesn't mean it's a perfect equation, but generally speaking, you want to aim for at least half your body weight in ounces. So let's say someone is 100 pounds. They'd want at least 50 ounces of water. If they do any sort of activity, maybe a little more. Now here's the thing, if you don't drink any water right now, or you drink like 2 cups, and you find out you're supposed to have like 9 based on your weight, just an example. It's kind of, I'm not saying you can't do it, because I'm someone who always likes to believe you can accomplish anything with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you might not want to just like jump 7 cups, and I don't know if you'd be drinking otherwise, but I'm glad to see people hydrating, alhamdulillah, probably because you brought it with you. So that's a good example. But here's the thing, you want to be gradual with yourself if that makes sense, but hydration is also very important. It's also helpful, and again, I'm giving you information, you could test it with your body and see what works with you, but it's also really good to separate your water from your eating. It's good for digestion. So even, subhanAllah, this is even prophetic wisdom. What's the most common way people break fast? Anyone know?
Pancakes, salad,
Okay, and then what do some people do after that?
drink milk or water.
And some people do what after this? Oh, sure. I think you said it back there. I think so. If not, that's okay. So sometimes, and this is okay if you don't do it because our religion gives so much flexibility, but some people will drink some water, have some dates, maybe some people have milk, and then they'll pray, and then they'll come to eat. And digestively, that's actually really good for you. So to drink water like 10, 15 minutes before you eat, it eases the stomach after it's been fasting all day. Again, even if you don't do that, that's okay. But something to consider. Now, why lemon water is really good is because, one, it has vitamin C, which helps boost your immunity and protect you from anything harmful. 2, it also alkalizes the body's pH level, the same way that greens do. It's really good in lemon water, and you could, if you don't just want it sour, you can sweeten it with different things. You know, if you do want to use sugar, not all sugar is created equal. So does anyone know the healthiest form of sugar? I'm not talking about sugar substitutes now, but just the healthiest form of sugar. Yeah.
Like sugar, like not natural in foods.
Absolutely, yes. But if someone wanted to like add sugar, anyone know? Okay. Honey is definitely a good sugar substitute, but in terms of sugar, have you guys ever heard of cane sugar? So it's an actual plant,
Yeah.
and it's much different than the white processed sugar. So if you go to the supermarket and you buy like natural cane sugar, that's your best option if you want actual sugar. The thing is even with fruits or those sugars, they're still going to increase your blood sugar levels, right? Which impacts your energy levels. So if you do want to make a lemonade, it would be good to do that. But if you want to go even further, like I like to think of things of optimalness. So like cane sugar is definitely better than white refined sugar. Honey is better than cane sugar. Again, that doesn't mean you don't have one, but just if you want to like optimize. Even better than that might be, there's other types of sweeteners found. Now there's some like fake sweeteners. I'm sure you guys have heard of things like Splenda or Sweet and Low and things like that. Sometimes adults have them or kids. But those are typically chemically processed. There are some other things, like there's something called monk fruit sweetener, which doesn't impact your blood sugar level at all. Stevia is a natural green plant, but not all of them are created equally, so you want to read ingredients and only the ones that actually just comes from the plant. Now, in terms of building a healthy iftar, I realize most of you probably don't, maybe you go out with friends sometimes or you eat what's prepared. Does anyone in here cook? You might. Some people at a young age like, okay. Anyone want to share, like, do you cook like a lot or just certain things? Do you mind sharing? You don't have to. Do you ever cook iftar?
Yeah.
Okay. Like for yourself, for your family? Okay. Absolutely. Here's the thing. You are, I'm not suggesting you take information here and go like make over what your parents are going to do at home. But I'm sure that, for the most part, parents buy what their children like. You can request certain things. You can pick things that are already at home. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us. But here's the thing. On your iftar plate, you want to make sure you have that protein, carbohydrate, and healthy fat, and also some greens as well. So you want a protein source, healthy fats, like I mentioned, greens, and then a healthy carb source. If you really want to build a balanced iftar plate, inshallah. Now, suhoor, and this is just an example, and there's many things that fall in the category, but suhoor is really great. And depending on, different people do different things. So some of you, maybe you wake up. Some of you, maybe you go to Taraweeh and then you have something when you come home. It really all depends on what you do, what's best. I will say that during Ramadan, it's not the best to only have one meal. So regardless of what food choices you make, and it's always quality over quantity, having one really big meal isn't optimal for digestion. At least two is not optimal. Like one big one. Now here's the thing with that. If that's what really works for someone, then that's okay. But it's always better to break it out. And we even see that in like prophetic wisdom, right? So suhoor and iftar. Some people might get hungry more or whatnot, and maybe they even have like a third snack. Like, do any of you go to Taraweeh during the week or weekend? Raise your hands if you sometimes go. So sometimes having like an iftar, right? So here's what people sometimes do. They might like overdo it at iftar because they haven't been eating all day. And then they might feel sluggish and whatnot. Versus if you break it out into meals, it's a lot more helpful, if that makes sense. Just energetically speaking. And it's very beneficial to have suhoor. And we know that there's a really famous hadith that says, eat suhoor for there are blessings in it. And similar to iftar, your suhoor plate, you're going to want to design pretty similarly. Definitely hydrating foods. This is going to be important because this is the meal that's going to hold you up till, the next day's iftar, inshallah. But some things that are very hydrating are cucumber, watermelon, a lot of fruits and vegetables, but those two definitely are very big. Some greens, a source of protein, which could look different for everyone, inshallah. Now, some of you said you like smoothies. Raise your hand again if you like smoothies. So there's a lot of different things you could do, but it's a nice way to get fruits and vegetables, especially if someone doesn't like eating fruits and vegetables, or if you do, regardless. And I could send this, I already did send this to Brother Tariq, but nonetheless, if you want, these are just 2 recipes that if you want after and during Q&A, you could take a photo. But you can mix and match a lot of different things. But has anyone ever had a smoothie that actually had vegetables in it? So I have a picture here of a green smoothie. Okay, so some people, like, you can't even really taste it. If you put something like baby spinach or baby kale, that pairs really well with, here I have it with apple. Anyone here like pineapple? So pineapple, banana, and some greens, that tastes very good as well, inshallah. Now, how many of you like dessert? Okay, and there's a lot of really nice Ramadan desserts, and I'm definitely not suggesting that you do not have. Remember at the beginning I said, this isn't about deprivation or anything like that, but if you sometimes also want some extra desserts that could be really healthy, energetic, to tie into anything else you're having, I have 2 ideas here. Has anyone ever heard of 2-ingredient ice cream that you can make at home? Anyone ever do that before? Have you done it before with? Okay, so if you actually freeze bananas, and you peel them. Once I actually recommended this years ago and the person didn't peel it, so it's very hard to peel a frozen banana, but you want to peel it. And then, does anyone know what cacao powder is? How many of you like chocolate? Anyone here? So I know I like chocolate. Do you know that chocolate's actually healthy for you in its real form? So chocolate comes from cacao. Cacao comes from a plant. SubhanAllah, the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is amazing. Now, cacao has antioxidants. Is it a question or? Okay, I'm going to have Q&A. Are you going to be here towards the end? Okay, so Q&A will be in a little bit, inshallah. Now, and I suggest if you think you'll forget it, just write it down, inshallah. So, cacao has a lot of really great properties. It has magnesium in it, which is very good for you. And, that's where chocolate comes from. Now, some chocolates you wouldn't exactly consider a health food because if you read the ingredients, it's mostly sugar, a lot of other preservatives, and then sometimes they don't even use real cacao. It's like alkalized cocoa. You'll read cocoa versus cacao. You can buy cacao at the grocery store, and it has to be sweetened because it's just the pure cacao plant. But if you were to mix a tablespoon of that and 1 banana in like a food processor in a blender, it's very easy. You'll actually get like a really nice ice cream. So again, you guys could take a photo of this. You could also do chocolate dipped strawberries. There's a lot of really cool things. Towards the end when I have questions, if you have like a food you really love and you want to know how do I make it a little bit healthier, I could explain for specific things, inshallah. How many of you exercise? Okay. How many of you exercise because you have gym class? Okay. How many of you exercise outside of gym class? Okay. So, have any of you ever exercised during Ramadan? I know I keep switching because there's stuff on there that. So you have? Okay. How has that been for you?
Well, it depends on how I'm feeling.
Of course. So here's the thing. You always want to listen to your body. Again, Ramadan is not the time to necessarily start something new with fitness, but if you want to work out in Ramadan, there are ways you could do it that are more healthy, if that makes sense. First, you want to ask yourself, what are you already doing workout-wise or exercise-wise? So if you are doing nothing, Ramadan isn't necessarily the time to start training for like a 25K, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you more so want to maintain in Ramadan. Now, if you do want to exercise in Ramadan and you already exercise, you probably want to take it down just a little bit and optimize the times you exercise. And that could actually give you energy, but you want to listen to your body as to not dehydrate or anything like that. Also, if you don't exercise, I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything at all. You could do something light or use Ramadan as a time to start something light or even do something like walking, inshallah. We'll have some nice weather and that could be nice. Now, the best times to work out during Ramadan are right before Maghrib, because you'll literally replenish right after. Right before Suhoor, but again, that's kind of unrealistic with time, but just, that's because those are eating hours, but that might not be the best lifestyle choice. And then if you must work out midday, you just want to make sure you elevate your hydration, and that you get adequate amount of protein because like you said, protein is really important for our muscle mass. Now, there are different types.
Can you work out after Suhoor?
You can, absolutely. And that would probably be like a fourth best, and I'll elaborate a little bit more in the Q&A, inshallah. So, types of exercise. Really, there's 3, but then you could branch it out even more. Cardio, which works your heart out. Resistance training, that trains your muscles, and then mobility, which basically increases your ability to move and your flexibility. Is it a question?
Yes.
So can we leave it towards the end too, which we're almost at, just so we could, I'm excited, and I kind of said it in the beginning, you guys, you were very quiet and not, and now you're talkative, alhamdulillah. And if you weren't, that's okay too. Every audience is different. Now, examples of cardio: walking, jump rope, plyometrics, basketball, running. There's more, obviously. Resistance training would be weightlifting, body weight exercises. What I mean by that is something like you don't have a weight, but maybe do you guys know what a plank is, maybe? So that's a body weight exercise. There's also things like resistance bands, but they're different in the fact that one is training your muscle and one is training your heart. Although you can train your heart through resistance training, and I won't get specific because I don't know how interested you are in that topic, but in the Q&A, if someone asks, I will address that. And then mobility is all about movement, functionality, and stretching, inshallah. Now, this I think is the last slide before Q&A, and then it looks like we have some good questions, and I'll answer the questions publicly, but if you have something individual, I'll stick around too if you don't want to share it. in front of others. But Ramadan is really not about food. It is, but it isn't. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the modality or the tool of food, right? Like we do not eat. And it's not just about not eating. What else do we refrain from during Ramadan?
Sinning.
Someone, I didn't hear that.
Sinning.
Sinning, okay, yeah.
Like how other people feel.
Okay, so you're saying like a reason, okay, yeah.
Desires.
Okay. And some, right, some things are halal, but definitely some desires. Anything else? So we have to monitor our character, how we treat people. We should be doing that regardless, yes?
To get closer to Allah?
Yes, absolutely. So we said that in the beginning. So these are all things connected to fasting, right? Now, it's all about remembering Allah, and it's a taqwa opportunity. It's not about being perfect. It's about using the fasting. You definitely want to help your parents. You know, I realize, you know, if you do live with your parents, some kids sometimes don't, but if you do, you want to help your parents out, inshallah. You want to be a good friend. You want to be good to yourself. Remember in the beginning I said it's a good time to reflect. A good way to do this is journal. And sometimes, has anyone here ever journaled? Okay, so sometimes, yeah, and it's sometimes more common if you're an adult or even with the girls in the back, but journaling could look like a lot of different things. So if you have a phone, or even if you don't, you could do it on a piece of paper, but it could be like reflecting at the end of the day. What's one thing I'm grateful for? What's something that went well today? What's something that, you know, how did I feel connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today? But using Ramadan as a time to reflect is a really good way to practice purification of the heart and getting to know oneself. And most importantly, you also want to have fun. So this is about worship. That is why we're put on this planet, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you know, we can have fun doing it. When we look at the seerah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see that our deen encourages all these different things. So I'm going to go in order. I think it was 1, 2, 3 with questions, and then I'll open it up further. So do you remember your question?
Yeah, the
Okay.
chocolate part. Was it?
Yes.
Is it just dark chocolate or general chocolate?
Okay, so really good question. So here's the thing. So dark chocolate, remember when I was talking about cacao, and I'll go, well, there's nothing really on this slide, but remember when I mentioned cacao?
Yes.
If you go to the supermarket and you buy cacao, so not cocoa, but cacao, you could buy it either, they sell it as nibs or in a powder. That is literally and if there's no other ingredients in it, that would be 100% cacao. You know how dark chocolate sometimes says something like 75%, 90%, it always has a percent on it? Dark chocolate means there's more pure cacao in it. So the more cacao there is in it, the less sugar or other ingredients there are in it. All chocolate could be okay, even if there's 30%. The question is, if it's not dark, what's that other 70%? So it's very different if it's like chemicals and preservatives and white refined sugar versus if it's like mixed with, do you guys know the coconut tree? Coconut actually produces its own type of sugar. There's something called coconut sugar, which comes from sap, and that's really healthy for you. So it doesn't have to be dark chocolate, but you want to ask yourself, what if it's not? I think to be technically dark chocolate, you have to be at least 70%. If it's under, you simply want to know what are the other ingredients. Does that make sense? Or I could explain more. Okay. And then working out after suhoor, right? That was your question. Do you have anything you want to elaborate on the question, or?
No, I mean, you know, I know you mentioned it's tough to wake up before, but maybe, you know, you can eat something light and then rather than go back to sleep. I know some self-development people will tell you don't go back to sleep. It's better to start your day off early, like 5 a.m. club and all these other things.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So I'm just wondering if maybe instead of going back to sleep or doing it before suhoor, you could do it after suhoor.
Yeah, you absolutely can. What I would say is if you were going to try that, listen to your body and see how it feels. So for instance, if different people need different amounts of sleep, right? Especially, you know, typically growing teenagers need more than like adults, for example. So you want to listen to your body for sure. It is good to whatnot. The one thing that might be at risk there is because, I mean, it's very close to nourishment time, but someone just wants to be cautious of dehydrating. Now, if someone's healthy and it makes them feel good, great. But I would just say experiment, if that makes sense, because if someone feels And if they're used to exercise, it's different. But the thing is, if someone starts to feel thirsty or whatnot and their nutrition isn't that well beforehand, they have a really long time till they're breaking. But that could work well, and I would say to experiment. And even if someone wanted to test this out, for example, it's possible to have suhoor, maybe work out with the intention that you're done, but leave yourself a little bit of time if you need to drink water or whatnot, just to experiment. But if it works for you, then that's definitely okay. And regarding doing it before suhoor, if it works for someone, it's okay. But let's say someone wants to go to Taraweeh or has other obligations and whatnot, that might not be optimal. Sometimes to do it before suhoor, it might encourage someone to stay up like all night, which, you know, unless we're talking about like staying up in like worship or the last 10 nights, generally isn't recommended. It's, you know, to just, we're not supposed to necessarily flip the day with the night, if that makes sense. But I would say test it out. It could work, inshallah, but you want to keep an eye for like dehydration, inshallah. And then you had a question?
Yeah, so you said like it's not good for you like to make one big meal for Ramadan.
Uh-huh.
So like is it better to have like 2 big meals or like 2 small meals?
So everyone's appetite is really different, right? So do you guys know, I shared some things on macronutrients here, but does anyone know the hadith that tells us how we should fill our stomachs? Yeah.
So it should be 1/3 food, 1/3 water, and 1/3 air.
Okay. So everyone's very different, but this is really, really great prophetic advice, right? Now, the most important part from this, even if we don't get technical, because you're not actually going to like measure your stomach and know exactly how much everything is you want to leave room for air. So sometimes some people go into a food coma after having iftar, and if it happens, it's okay, but you want to listen to yourself. It feels very uncomfortable to not eat all day and then be so stuffed that you can't breathe, you know, or that digestion becomes really bizarre or whatnot. So you want to leave room for air. That's how you know. I believe in something called intuitive eating. What that means is that you can listen to your body and figure out what's right for you. So sometimes magazines or different things, they throw ideas at us that like, you should diet, you should eat this amount. Of course, someone based on their nutrition, their activity, all of that, you can get portion recommendations, but really you want, going back to the recommendations I gave before about having a protein, a fat, a healthy carbohydrate, you want to make sure that your plate is well balanced, first of all, and you want to eat so you're satisfied, but there's still room. And it's always better to break it out into at least 2 meals because 1, you're stretching it out, which helps your fast. 2, you're following a sunnah, so that's a win-win. Doesn't mean you're wrong if you do it otherwise. You have to see what's best for your schedule. And 3, it like breaks down your nutrition. You know, not eating all day and then attacking your body can be harmful. Any other questions? Okay. So if you have a private question, I'll stay up here for a little bit, inshallah, and it was really great to speak to all of you, and this seems like a really good, awesome youth group. Jazakallah khair for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I wish you all a really great Ramadan. May we meet it, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.